Hey, welcome back everyone. So in this tutorial, we are going to bring in a CSV file containing some information on different types of doctors. And then we're going to get a sense of the data frame that we bring in from the CSV file. So to get started, the very first thing is to bring in important libraries. So Python has libraries. Each library in Python gives you access to certain functions slash methods that can make your data analysis journey much, much easier. So the most important library for a data analysis is Pandas. So we're going to be bringing that in first. Import pandas as PD. And then just in case, we might not even use it in this tutorial, but just in case, it's good practice to bring in NumPy because that gives you access to more complex operations on data frames. And remember that in Python, in Pandas, a Pandas data frame is very much just like a table in Excel. So import NumPy as NP. And then here, as PD, when we say import pandas, so bring in pandas, but bring it in as PD, this makes it so that every time we try to access a method in pandas, we don't have to, let me show you, we don't have to type out something like this, pandas dot read Excel or pandas dot read CSV. Instead, because we've aliased pandas, we can write out pd dot read Excel or pd dot read CSV. We still need that PD there to let our Jupyter Notebook know, hey, I'm going to pandas and getting the methods there and then bringing them back here, but you can do it in a shorter way. All right, so I'm going to run this. And remember, on a Mac, you can just Command Enter, and that runs, and you know it runs because it has a number appear here. So if I had been working with this notebook for the first time, I would have actually seen a 1 come up here because this would have been my first run, but I was actually doing some work earlier. So this is actually the 8th run for this notebook. Not important, but just in case you had a question about why 8 is showing up here and not 1. For our purposes, it's 1. All right. So then from there, the next thing we want to do is actually bring in the CSV file. And we don't just want to bring it in, we want to convert it into a Pandas data frame so that we can more easily apply operations to it, explore it, analyze it. All right. So bring in CSV file into a Pandas data frame. All right, so we can call our data frame doctors DF. DF stands for data frame. Doesn't have to be this name. You don't have to name it exactly that. This is just a variable name, but it's a good idea to make your code as clear as possible. So whatever name you do choose, just try to make it descriptive of what the data frame contains. So we're initializing, we're declaring this variable, and what we want this variable to have to be is the data frame. So pd.read CSV, and then when I put in my file path here, because the CSV has to be read from a location, I'm using my file path on my personal computer. Your file path may be different, but just find out what it is. And this might take a little bit of trial and error because I have recently moved this data set. So let's see if this works. And it doesn't because I forgot quotes. Do not forget your quotes. You need to have quotes around this. And it still doesn't. You see all of these errors, and you're seeing that this is not a file path. So what you're seeing me do off screen is, well, you're not seeing me do it, but what I'm doing off screen is I'm going to go locate where this data is so that I can access it. All right, so after much trial and error, what I realized, which was a pretty obvious mistake, was that I forgot to actually include the name of the CSV file. Just put the name of the folder, which is a mistake you don't want to make because you want to bring in the actual CSV file. So here's the file path on my computer, and I am telling Pandas, hey, get me this file path, get me the CSV that's at this file path, and then convert that CSV into a data frame, and then store that data frame into this doctors_df variable. So let's run that. All right, great. And then one other thing I want to mention is when I was getting errors upon running the cell because of my mistake, there was a lot of code. And so what I like to do when I am troubleshooting my errors is I like to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the error message, because usually that's where I can get the clearest, closest to English understanding of what's going on. Sometimes it still doesn't work and you do have to read the jargon in the middle, but often just that last line is enough. Okay, so moving on, we've got our doctors_df. It should contain a data frame with the rows and columns that were originally in the CSV file here. So let's check out the first 5 rows. So doctors_df.head. This method allows you to check out those first 5 rows because it returns them. Okay, here we go. So we see these are the first 5 rows, and you'll see here that in this data frame, this is the data frame. In this data frame, the indices for each of these rows start at 0. So in Python, a data frame index, the first one, is actually 0, not 1. But there are 5 rows shown here because 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 5. And then you see the column names up top here, and then you see the row values here. So it looks like there's some kind of NPI, National Provider ID here. The doctor's specialty is here, and then the patient count is here, although we are starting to see these NANs, which are called null or missing values in Python. So next thing is list the columns in the data frame. So to do that, we can do doctors_df, that's the data frame variable, dot columns. Then we get this, but I don't like this part and this part. They're clutter. I just want to see the column name. So what I like to do is put this in a list. So I feed this doctors_df.columns as an argument to my list method. And then I just get this very simple list of column names, NPI ID, specialty, and IBD patient count. So it seems like there are 3 columns in this data frame. All right, let's get the number of rows and number of columns in the data frame. So there's going to be 3 columns, but let's just see how to do that. So we can do doctors_df.shape. Yep, we see 3 columns here, and there are about 6,500 rows, 6,538 to be precise. Okay, so then, I did see some null values already, some missing values here. So I want to actually get count of missing values per column. So I'm going to show you the methods you can use in Python to get the number of missing values for each column. So for NPI ID, for specialty, for IBD patient count. Okay, so to do that, you do doctors_df, starting with a data frame. You got to know what you're working with. And then you do .isNA.sum. This part, using these methods, allows you to get the number of missing values per column. Let's run it, and here we go. So NPI ID, this column has no missing values. That's what the 0 represents. The 0 tells me there are no missing values in this column. All of the rows have complete values. For specialty, we also get 0. That means that there are no missing values for the specialty column. All of the row values are filled out. But if you look at the IBD patient count, you see there are 3,500, over 3,500 missing values here. So that's quite a few, right? And then we need to understand how to think about that number, because what does it mean? 3,500, yeah, it seems like a pretty big number, but let's say if you had a data set that had 20 million rows or 100 million rows, then if you only had 3,500 missing values, maybe it wouldn't be such a big deal. But for smaller data sets, it might be a bigger deal. So one way to think about how significant of an impact missing values will have is to do something like this. So we could just do some quick math, where we could take 3533, which is the number of missing values for IBD patient count. We could divide it by the total number of rows, 6538. And then this will give us the percent of missing values for that column in the data frame. We'll just multiply that by 100 and we go. So 54% of this data frame has missing values for IBD patient count. That's more than half. So this is just one thing you want to start thinking about as a data scientist / data analyst. You want to start thinking about, okay, I'm going to encounter missing values in the real world. How do I think about the impact they might have? How to think about how important it's going to be to either get other data sources, or to drop the rows with missing data, or to do something else. In this case, if this is a very important column, having 54% of our values missing for that column is significant. It does require taking that step back and thinking, all right, what should I do about this? Okay, so we're going to stop there for this one, but feel free to check out my other short tutorials and let me know if you have questions in the comments. All right, talk soon.